as the 10th major entry in the Call of Duty franchise. Ghost, back in 2013, represented a major shift in branding. This game, coming off of the original Modern Warfare and Black Ops sequels, was the first big pitch to the fanbase to offer something a bit different. Instead of going balls to the wall, throwing massive war-themed action set pieces in your face, Call of Duty Ghosts instead prefers to dial the tone back several notches. What's emphasized here is stealth-based combat to the point where that's essentially what the game is for most of its runtime. This is a stealth game placed within the Call of Duty design philosophy. The result is that it works most of the time, at least until the latter third act of the campaign, as it slowly abandons its stealth theme in favor of a more traditional FPS full of explosive set pieces leading to the endgame climax. Story-wise, Ghost is set in the Middle East, where a fictional Federation of the Americas responds to a global economic crisis. The Federation grows into a global superpower as it invades and conquers Central America, the Caribbean, and Mexico. You play as Logan Walker throughout most of the game, who belongs to the Ghosts, a special operations force who is trained to conduct clandestine missions behind enemy lines. As a character, Logan practically doesn't exist. You never see his face. He doesn't have any dialogue throughout the entire game for some strange reason. And to make matters worse, you're just simply told to go places and do things by the other characters that's around him. This is a classic silent protagonist executed in a more lazy fashion than the standard. Unlike other games such as the original Dead Space and several entries in the Zelda franchise, Logan doesn't offer the player anything in the way of inspiration or creativity. The character is literally a voiceless, faceless sprite, a proxy for the player to live out their semi-future war shooter without the need to know anything about firearms. Call of Duty already had this issue before Ghost, but it seems more prevalent here given the sheer lack of effort by the writers to make Logan an actual character. The story itself is also not very intriguing. The only other character besides the father that's present throughout most of the game is Logan's brother, who does have some personality unlike Logan. However, the character is linked directly to Logan given that they're siblings. I never once felt any kind of symmetry between these two characters, once again because Logan is not a character. You also have this dog that's around you in the game, and it's like, okay, cool, I guess. I'll put it this way. When a canine is more interesting than your main protagonist, then you have a serious framing problem in your fictional story. The worst part of this story is that the ending is just shit. It's clearly very rushed for one, and the tone clashes immensely to the point where you have to ask yourself, is this a sci-fi game, or is this just something that doesn't know what it wants to be? We go from a speeding train to a speeding NASCAR tank to somewhere in outer space where we're shooting henchmen in spacesuits to just what the hell is this? It's all over the place by the end, when the game was themed appropriately for the first two-thirds of the runtime. Then there's the ending cutscene, which throws up a middle finger in the face of the player. Thanks for playing, but the bad guy wins, and you still lose because we said so. It's basically Far Cry 5 before Far Cry 5 came 5 years later and did the same thing worse than this game does it. Anyway, what about the gameplay? Well, it's Call of Duty. There's not much variation or attempt to change anything, at least in this entry. Structure-wise, this is a typical Call of Duty game, but what is interesting is the level design and structure of the missions themselves. The game really takes advantage of the theme of using stealth to take out enemies. At times, it does it almost too well, to where you can pick up just how scripted the game actually is, but at the same time, it doesn't actually take away from the gameplay itself. The weapons are varied, the pacing is handled appropriately, and I did play this on veteran difficulty. The performance is on point like really any Activision game. It's what you would expect from a Call of Duty release. The one new element that the dev team tried with this one is that you get to play as Riley, the German shepherd that accompanies you in some of the missions. The dog was interesting from a gameplay perspective, but like everything else in the game, it's scripted to the point of being predictable, and it's rather limited in its implementation. It's not used too often in the game, and maybe that's for a good reason. because the dog could have been overused, which would have turned off many players. So I didn't dislike the dog gameplay, but I will say that the mission towards the end of the game, where you're tasked with having to pick up Riley and carry the dog across the battlefield while dealing with oncoming enemy units who just happen to ignore your AI companions just to shoot at you, was an extreme frustration and test of patience that I don't recall fondly. That also happens to be the worst mission in the entire game. The best missions in the game, the best three, would have to be this mission where you and your team infiltrate this office building, and you have to rappel down the building dealing with enemy units both on the outside and inside. That was a standout. There's also this mission where you're underwater and you have to fight enemy units and avoid sharks. The framing of that worked more than it should have. And then there's a mission where you and your squad infiltrate an enemy base disguised as the other soldiers on duty. That was good fun as well. The campaign as a whole unfortunately loses steam towards the end, and it becomes a nonsensical war game that abandons the stealth element, which is disappointing. Overall, Call of Duty Ghosts is a good time if you can ignore its weak points, but it never truly lives up to its full potential. The game never truly caught on with the player base, and as a result, the Ghost label was quickly abandoned in this franchise. I would like to see Call of Duty attempt something like this again, but I don't see it happening as the franchise stands now.